Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing The Devil Wears Prada, the 2006 film based on the 2003 novel of the same name by Lauren Weisberger. This is such a well-acted, well-written movie, of course starring Meryl Streep and Anne Hathaway. And I love all of the subtlety in this movie with the characters and the way things are portrayed in this cutthroat world of fashion. And I first saw this movie after, I didn't see it in theaters, I saw it in high school though. We watched it in class. I don't know how it was relevant to our class, but that's when I first watched it. And I hadn't seen it in a long time, so I forgot how it's just such a great movie. And I love the opening sequence. I absolutely love that song by Katie Tunstall, Suddenly I See. It gets stuck in my head every single time I've seen this movie. Suddenly I see, suddenly I see. I love it. But I love the fact that it's where we meet Anne Hathaway's character, Andy Sachs, and she's getting ready for her job interview. And she's portrayed as this kind of frumpy woman who isn't necessarily fashionable. And then comparing that to other women getting ready and they're putting on their best clothing and expensive shoes and then just heading out for the day. So already that comparison, it's great. And then when Andy applies for the job and she's just very much a fish out of water with all of these high-end professional people in the fashion world, and she sticks out like a sore thumb. And then we meet Emily, played by Emily Blunt, who is being moved to first assistant, replacing herself as the second assistant to the editor-in-chief of the magazine, Miranda Priestley, of course, played by Meryl Streep. And even though Andy is so out of her element, then when she goes to apply for the job, and of course Miranda so unimpressed by her, and then when she's trying to stick up for herself saying, look, I know I don't seem the part, but I'm smart, I'm a fast learner. And then Miranda's art director, Nigel, played by Stanley Tucci, just walks in, and it's just like they don't give her a second glance. But it was that one moment where she was sticking up for herself that gets her the job. And she sees it as an opportunity, that the whole reason she applied for this job is to open doors for her because she wants to be a journalist. And she's written articles for her college newspaper. So she figures working as Miranda Priestley's assistant will help her in her career. And then, of course, she also has her boyfriend, Nate, played by Adrian Grenier. Very good looking. And her friends. And they're teasing her like, oh, how could you be working in the fashion industry? And she just sees it as, well, I just got to stick it out for a year and then I can move on to what I really want to do, working as a journalist. And that whole scene where Andy's just kind of taking notes as Miranda's putting together a piece for the magazine, and she puts the dress and then the jacket, and they're saying, oh, which belt? I don't know, they're so different. And then she just kind of scoffs at that, and then Miranda's saying is something funny, and then she realizes, oh no, it's just those belts look exactly the same. And she has that whole great speech, Miranda, saying, oh, well, you picked out that blue sweater and thinking that you're making a statement, but really it's the fashion world that decided it for you. That's just I love that whole entire speech, and how Andy just really doesn't get it. And for her, it's like she doesn't necessarily respect this world and how fashion is a booming business. And even though, what's funny though, like with this movie, I mean, magazines are kind of more obsolete nowadays. Everything's all online. So that felt a little dated. And also the fact, obviously, with the phones, I mean, there were still flip phones in this movie. This was before iPhones, since those came out in 2007. But they had the flip phones. She had like her Nokia phone. Every time it beeps, she's got to be at her beck and call, because she is trying to prove herself, Andy, that she can make it. But then she's feeling so down on herself And Miranda always calls her Emily. And Emily, the actual Emily, saying, that's you, like, go in. And she feels like she can't do anything right. And I also have the montage, too, where Miranda just throws her coat and her purse every day on Andy's desk. Like, where's that paper I had the other day? And all those things. Just always straight to business with her. Very professional, very demanding. And everyone's really clearly afraid of her. She's just very intimidating. And then Andy, when she feels like all hope is lost and she's saying, oh, Miranda hates me, and then she goes to Nigel, just kind of confides in him. And then he's saying, millions of girls would kill to have your job, and you're not even trying. And she's saying, what are you talking about? Of course I'm trying. And he's saying, you're complaining and you're upset because you didn't do your job right, and then you're upset why she didn't give you a gold star. So that is a turning point then for her character. And then she's just like, Nigel. And he's like, oh. So then, of course, the classic makeover, which Anne Hathaway has had plenty of that in her movies. I'm thinking, of course, of Princess Diaries, where she goes from the frizzy-haired nerdy girl to a princess. And then in this movie where she goes from frumpy. And they're always teasing her too. Well, not even teasing, blatantly mocking her for her weight. Like, oh, a size 6. I mean, God. But then when he takes her to, like, their vast closet for Jimmy Choo's and just all the name brands, and then she walks in all confident. So the wonders of a makeover, night and day. Now she's this confident, more professional. She just answers the phone like Miranda Priestley's office. And before, when she was like, Mrs. Priestley, that's what I meant, Miranda Priestley, before when she just was so unsure of what she was doing. And saying, oh, could you spell Gabbana? Like, she just was so out of her element. And now she has that confidence. And then Miranda kind of gives her a second glance now. So then that's more of her becoming more comfortable in this world of fashion and in this role as Miranda's assistant. So her taking it more seriously now. And then the real turning point, too, with Miranda starting to trust her is when she allows Andy to drop off the infamous book. And it's just the book of a mock-up of their upcoming edition of the Runway magazine. And it's nice, though, that Emily, because she could have sabotaged Andy, but then she tells her exactly what she needs to do. It's like, you have to go in, put it on the table with the 2 ferns, and she's looking around like all these tables with all the flowers and saying, don't talk to anyone. Because Emily really knows Miranda so well, obviously. And she's all the time, though, always being snarky to Andy, even when Andy was just trying to make pleasant conversation, like, oh, my dad's going to be in town, going to go see Chicago. And then when she says, you have any fun weekend plans? And she just says, yes, and that's it. But then even with that, when she's out to dinner with her dad, and she gets the call from Miranda saying, I need to fly out of here tonight, and then they missed the play, and then Miranda then had missed her daughter's recital. But then when she drops off the book, when she doesn't know where to go, and then her twins are saying, oh, you could bring the book up here, and they're like, oh, Emily does that all the time. Like, they're just kind of being mischievous, and they're like, oh, yeah. So then she's going up there, and then a glimpse of Miranda's home life when she's talking with her husband. He's saying, well, I'm just Miranda Priestley's husband, and she didn't even show up to dinner or whatever it was because she's so committed to her work. And Miranda doesn't know what to say, and then all of a sudden she sees Andy, and she's staring at her like she can't believe she's there. And it's that mixture of horror, yet embarrassment, yet like she wants to scream at her for her incompetence. And then Andy just kind of leaves the book there on the floor and just scurries away like a scared little mouse. And Emily can't believe it, like, you walked upstairs, like, oh my God, like, it's the worst thing. And Andy's worried, like, am I going to get fired now? And even before, when Andy was lamenting and confiding to Nigel how one little screw up and she is berating her, and yet anything she does right and just goes unacknowledged. But then, surprisingly, Miranda just gives her another task, saying that her daughters want to read the new Harry Potter book that's unpublished. So then she's just like, how am I going to get the unpublished Harry Potter book? So then she just calls in a favor to that guy that she met at that party. That attractive guy Christian Thompson, played by Simon Baker. But I mean, my personal opinion, her boyfriend is much better looking than that guy. I mean, he comes off as this nice, friendly guy, and that he's interested in her writing, and she's a fan of his, and he's offering to help her in her career, like, oh, I'll read some of your articles. And to me, he comes off as a sleaze because he's only doing that because he's interested in sleeping with her. But she's just kind of falling for his charm, even though she's got her boyfriend who's much better looking and just sweeter and just a genuinely nice guy, and he's a chef. But that's the thing, where she's slowly drifting from her friends, and she's getting more and more invested in this world and trying to do everything she can to appease Miranda. So then she manages to get the manuscripts, and first when she brings the coffee and she puts the manuscript on Miranda's desk, and Miranda looks impressed for a split second, but then she's just, one copy, what are my girls going to do with that? Share. And then Andy's just cool and calm, saying, oh, this is just an extra copy, and the girls have their manuscripts on their way to Grandma's. I got them bound so that they don't look like manuscripts, and then just, that's all. So she's impressed with that. She managed to do that impossible task, and because that would have been the end of her career, saying that if you don't do this, then don't bother coming in. So that would have been an excuse for her to fire her, instead of just because of what happened with the book and her seeing Miranda in that vulnerable state with her home life. And that moment too, though, because Andy was saying, oh, I'm just going to quit, I'll beat her to the punch, because she knew she was going to get fired. But then when that Christian guy called and saying he could give her the manuscripts, then she makes the decision to still continue with this career path, even though she could have quit. But that was a moment for her to decide that she still wants to continue being Miranda's assistant. And then again, she shows more of her competence when poor Emily is getting sick, but then the whole time she's talking about how she's excited to go to Paris with Miranda for Fashion Week. And then when she's sick, though, and then they go to the charity benefit, and then Emily keeps whispering the names of all the guests to Miranda when she greets them, and then when she can't remember one of them, and then Andy just swoops in and says it. And she wasn't even going to go because it was her boyfriend Nate's birthday. But then she's just stuck there. And then when she runs into Christian again, he says, oh, I love your articles that you gave me. And he's saying, oh, I can introduce you to people, just one drink. But then she decides, no, I need to go see my boyfriend. But then when she gets there, it's already so late. And it's like she's prioritizing her job over her relationship. So then he's drifting away from her, and even her friends, they see the change in her. Just like then when she goes to her friend's art gallery, and then she sees Christian again, and he gives her a kiss on the cheek, just being very flirtatious with her. And her friends saying, the Andy I know would just scoff at all this, and now look at you, I don't even know you anymore. And then another turning point is when Miranda says that she wants Andy to go to Paris instead of Emily. And then poor Emily now, she's like the new Andy, where she's running like a chicken with its head cut off with all of the bags and the coffee, like doing all the errands. And then when she gets hit by a car and she's hospitalized with her broken leg, and then Andy is the one that has to go and tell her that Miranda wants her now to go to Paris. And Emily's just, poor Emily, when she's like, and you eat carbs, and you're going to get all these great clothes, and like, look at you, and she'd been wanting it so long, and Andy feels bad, and she's saying, just go. And then she goes to Paris, when even Nate, though, is saying, oh, you're going to Paris, and she's saying, oh, don't make me feel bad about it, because she's saying, I don't have a choice, and saying, you do have a choice, you're choosing this. And then when she's saying Nate, and then, of course, the opportune time when her phone rings, the perfect moment to really show this is what she chose now. She's choosing her career over everything else, and her career specifically by any means to help move her forward in life, which that's respectful and commendable. Sometimes you have to do things that you necessarily didn't see yourself doing in order to get yourself to a new place professionally. So that's fine, but then he feels that she's being a hypocrite. He's saying, at least own up to it, that this is who you are now, that you like this stuff now, like in this fashion world. And she's just saying, well, I don't have a choice, passing it off as that, even though she obviously does have a choice, and that's what she's choosing to do. She's choosing to advance herself professionally, and there's nothing wrong with that, but she's becoming increasingly not immoral, but less of her own values with her friends and her family and her boyfriend. So then she says, maybe we should take a break. And that's it. He says, that's the relationship you chose, when the phone's ringing and it's Miranda. So then they go off to Paris. And then Nigel is excited because he thinks that Miranda recommended him to be James Holt's partner for his new fashion line. And then Andy, meanwhile, she ends up giving into temptation. She kisses Christian and she's saying, I'm out of excuses. And then they sleep together. And then the next morning she finds a mock-up and he says, well, that Jacqueline, that woman from the charity, one of the guests at the charity, she's going to be the new creative director of Miranda's magazine, Runway. And then Andy's like, Miranda will be devastated. And then she just goes to all these attempts to tell Miranda. But before that, though, also one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Miranda is in her room and she's just sitting there without any makeup. And apparently that was a choice that Meryl Streep had, that she suggested for the scene, that Miranda not have any makeup in that scene, when she's just sitting there on the couch and she just confides in Andy that we're going to move Snoop to my table, and Andy's saying, your table's full, and she says, Steven's not coming. And she says, oh, so I don't need to pick him up for the airport? And Miranda says, well, sure, if he rethinks the divorce, then by all means, go pick him up. So then she's just at her most vulnerable, saying another divorce, and she's saying that she really just feels bad for her girls, that they lost another father figure. So it's really just her unmasked figuratively and physically, just vulnerable, so without any makeup. So that's why I really liked that in particular. That's cool that she's the one who suggested that for the scene. And then Andy just kind of being sympathetic, like, oh, Miranda, do you want me to cancel your evening? And Miranda's saying, why would we do that? So then it's just back to business as always. But then afterwards, when she finds out all of that from Christian, that Miranda will lose her job, then she's just trying to tell her. And then when she goes to her hotel room and Miranda just walks out saying, have you completely lost your mind? And then when she finally is able to tell her, and then Miranda is just talking about the flowers, and just, if I see any of those flowers, I'll be very disappointed. And her sarcasm is just great throughout the movie too, even when she tells her about the divorce and then talking about her kids, and then when she's just still talking about business and she's waiting for Andy to hand her the binder, and then she says, by all means, move at a glacial pace. You know how that thrills me. I like that. But then when she gives that whole speech, and then she says, I'm so happy to announce this new creative director, my dear friend and colleague. And then instead of it being Nigel, it's that woman, Jacqueline. So then it turns out that when then they're in the car together, and then Miranda just kind of smirks, saying, you though I didn't know, that she knew that they would have replaced her. So that's why she suggested Jacqueline for that role instead of Nigel. And that she also kind of blackmailed the guy, saying that she had a list of models and designers and all these people who said that they would leave with her should she ever decide to leave Runway. And then when she says to Andy that I see a great deal of myself in you, and that's really then a realization for Andy, when she's just like, no, I could never have done what you did to Nigel. And then when Miranda says, oh, please, Andrea, you've already done it to Emily. And it's just that cutthroat world, but that's just the way it is. It's business. And then Andy's saying no, but she's saying that was completely different, but that she didn't choose it. It's like, oh, you chose to get ahead. Again, what her boyfriend was saying, that you are the one that chose this, and her passing it off like she didn't have a choice. But of course she did. So then it's that actual realization for her. And then also when Miranda says, "Oh, please, Andrea, everybody wants this. Everybody wants to be us." Apparently the original line was "everybody wants to be me," but then again, Meryl Streep suggested that it's "everybody wants to be us," that she's not necessarily so egotistical, Miranda, that it's more about the world, this fashion world. So then when she walks out, that's it, after this very eye-opening conversation, and she just walks out all smiles to greeting the press and all the cameras. And then when Andy just has her deciding moment, and then Miranda's calling her, she just looks at her phone, just throws it into the fountain. That's it. She's free now. She's really making her choice that she really doesn't want this. And then when she goes home to Nate and trying to kind of mend that relationship, and he's saying, well, you're looking at the new sous chef, and that he's going to be moving to Boston. And then she's saying, well, I'm going to miss those late night grilled cheeses. And he says, I'm pretty sure they have that in Boston. So basically him inviting her to come with him so that they have a chance to mend their relationship. So that's nice. And then when she's saying, oh, I have an interview. Also, though, since, just to mention Nigel, before I mention Andy's resolution, but mentioning Nigel's resolution when he's passed up for the creative director role, and then he's saying, I'm disappointed, but I have to believe that my loyalty to Miranda will pay off. So he's hopeful that even though he missed out on this job, that still being loyal to Miranda in spite of everything, that one day it will work out for him. Something better for him will come in his career. So it's left hopeful for him, even though it's ending with kind of that devastating thing that he got passed over just for the sake that Miranda didn't lose her job. So he was just a casualty in that. So I think he'll turn out okay in the end. But then with Andy, then when she goes on that job interview, she goes to the publication company, and then the guy's saying, oh, what was with that? Just working for Miranda Priestley for less than a year. And she's saying, well, I learned a lot. And then he says, well, I called over there for a reference. And then Miranda said that of all the assistants she hired, you were her biggest disappointment, and that if I don't hire you, I'm an idiot. So after all that, she still respected her. And then, of course, that scene at the end when Miranda's getting into her car, she stops when she sees Andy across the street. Andy just smiles at her and gives a little wave, and Miranda just kind of brushes her off and just goes into the car without acknowledging her. And then Andy just kind of rolls her eyes like, oh, that's just how she is. That's just the nature of who she is. But then, of course, that beautiful moment where she just genuinely smiles, grateful for everything in spite of everything, and then just looks at the driver go. And then also with Emily, too, when Andy calls her saying, oh, I have all these clothes from Paris that I'm not going to need. And Emily's saying, oh, well, I guess I could take them off your hands. I'll have to have them taken in. They'll drown me. And she smiles to herself, too, and then she looks at the new assistant, and she just says, you have very big shoes to fill. I hope you know that. And she's just on her crutches with her broken leg, so that's a happy ending for her, too. And then Andy just walking off into the crowd, just on her next adventure, whatever she has next, whether a new career path for her, finally as a journalist, or now reconnecting with Nate. So everything turned out all right in the end for everyone. Not necessarily where they want to be, but having been better off, that Andy herself better off having had all of that experience. And Miranda, too, just kind of letting her walls down, having known Andy, and just being very grateful. That's just so much of that in that smile of hers, that genuine smile at the end. So again, I just love all those subtleties. And of course, all the fashion in this movie. The fashion itself is like a character in this movie. And it's just a really great movie about the dichotomy of wanting your success, yet also that finding that balance with what's really important, your personal relationships, your friendships, and your family. And that the sacrifices you make, that you have to own up to them. That, oh, don't be silly, everybody wants this, that this is what you do in this world, in the fashion world. And yet, even though she seems like this cruel, cold woman, Miranda, that she isn't at all. She is soft of heart in her own way. So all the complexities of each of these characters. It's all really interesting. And that's all. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, move it, football head. It's time for me to discuss Hey Arnold! Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.